Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Ukraine has introduced its first domestically produced 250-kilogram guided aerial bomb, now cleared for combat use under the Bravo 1 defense program as the war simultaneously intensifies on multiple fronts, including fresh Russian strikes that killed 2 people and injured 12 in the Kharkiv region overnight and reported 209 drone barrage across Ukraine. Joining us now to discuss it all further is Mariya Zolkina, Associate Research Fellow at the London School of Economics Ideas. Good to have you back with us. Good to see you.
Good morning. Nice to see you as well.
Yeah, so let's start with the technical first. I mean, this new bomb cleared for combat. How significant does this change what Ukraine can do in terms of its strike capabilities?
It might change the situation on the ground, like Russia's usage of their self-gliding bombs was changing situation dramatically for a negative scenario for Ukraine back in 2024, for instance. However, the main question now, to what extent the production will be scaled and to what extent the numbers of the produced bombs will be rising during the next years. However, the very fact of possession of this type of the weapons just contributes to already existing, let's say, more slightly, I would say, diplomatically, slightly more favorable situation on the ground for Ukraine, because in terms of new technologies, not just glided bombs, but drone technologies, Ukraine has severely deteriorated the Russia's starting position, and having another type of the weapons which only Russia was using will contribute to strengthening this, let's say, slightly better balance in favor of Ukraine. However, the main question is to what extent the production will be scaled in the months and years to come.
Yeah, and on that note as well, I mean, we've been seeing slowly incremental changes to what Ukraine can actually produce, right? There's a growing domestic, let's say, ability to do so. Do you think that this is going to, let's say, accelerate? We'll see other things, not just glide bombs, but also maybe other types of air defenses. Do you think that's now where this is all going?
Ukraine military production is in the process of acceleration of all the stages of development of the new technologies and production and testing and using them on the ground in different directions and different tracks, let's say. So one of the track for this production, which is the overall, is establishment of joint enterprises with our Western partners, including Poland. The second track is production for domestic usage on the battlefield, and that is where the main need we do have when it comes to not just gliding bombs, but basically the drone technologies, anti-drone technologies, other types of robots which are used on the ground, because the kill zone is now mainly controlled not by manpower, but mainly by drones controlled by people from somewhere else. And the third track, which will contribute to acceleration of military production, is export. I will remind that the export of Ukraine was one of the top 10 countries in the world before 2022 in terms of military export, and produced pretty good stuff, including heavy stuff like tanks produced in Kharkiv. However, there was a ban on export after the large-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, and since February this year, Ukraine is returning approvals for the export for local producers. So right now, we do expect that Ukrainian production, domestic ones, will be accelerated not just for domestic usage, but also for export purposes, not just for Europe, but for some other regions like Middle East and Gulf in particular.
Yeah, and we know that President Zelensky was traveling there recently, and more we get, I think, good marks from how Ukraine is not just building them, but also performing with drone combat. You mentioned Kharkiv. I want to unfortunately just get your sense of those recent overnight strikes. You know, we have more casualties, 12 injured, 2 civilians killed at this point in time. Tell us a bit more about what we know about those recent strikes that followed just a few from a few days ago.
Yeah, unfortunately, and this was not just one of the same severe strikes was in Kyiv, where more than 50 people were suffering, either injured or unfortunately killed. Altogether, more than 50 ones. I would explain this as Russia is and Ukraine are at another stage of political impasse, and US is not taking care of negotiations or organizing negotiations between Ukraine and Russia anymore, and Ukraine has improved its position where we talk just about like military positions on the ground and stopped Russia's advances, even slow one, but still stopped its advances on the battlefield. And the only response which Russia normally, starting from 2014, is using in these cases are attacks on the heartland of Ukraine. And Kharkiv, every 30 to 40 minutes, you can hear some explosions in Kharkiv, basically, as local citizens say. Unfortunately, the city is one of the most damaged in Ukraine, except for those who are directly on the front line, like in Donetsk region. But Kharkiv and Sumy, I would say, one of the most damaged and suffering cities when it comes to their day-to-day life, though there are no battlefield right away on the streets.
Mm-hmm. And much of what funds the battlefield, as we just mentioned, for Russia at least, is revenue from oil and gas. I just want to get your sense of the significance of now the extension. Now the United States has given an extension to Russia exactly on what was supposed to curtail its income, but now that has been extended from that U.S. decision. How significant is that?
We always forget that the main Russia's incomes and revenues from the oil and gas production coming is not after these products are being purchased, but when they are just extracted from the ground. So Russia actually benefited, surely, and Russian companies benefited and were fueled more money with their oil and gas purchased on the international markets when their deficit is in place after the outbreak of the war in the Middle East. However, some portion of the Russian incomes from oil and gas extraction, Russian budget receives immediately just as the tax for the extraction of this oil and gas. And this is like a part of the secret economic statistics of Russia, how much the local private or private state companies pay to the Russian budget just for the fact they extract the oil from the Russian soil. So I would say that Russia is definitely benefiting from the deficit due to the lifting of sanctions or easing of sanctions. But what is really hitting the Russian ability to pay for their war and pay for the military economy of Russia is that when Russia is not able to extract and Russia is not able to sell, altogether only works.
Mm-hmm. And also what's important to Russia is that relationship with China. In fact, we have Vladimir Putin in Beijing for a visit, just following after Trump's visit as well. I just want to get your sense. Now, there's an apparent report from the FT, they're quoting this, so this comes from the FT, that apparently during a conversation between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, Xi apparently told Trump that Putin may one day regret his decision to launch the war against Ukraine. What do you make of that, and what are you looking out for? What's Ukraine looking out for that summit between these two?
I think that Ukraine has, an Ukrainian expert community, political community, has long time ago understood that the position of China is just not to allow Russia to fall completely under the heavy weight of loss in this war. However, not to allow Russia to win is pretty clear. And from this point of view, Russia will definitely, and future generations of Russian leaders or Russian society probably will regret about the outbreak and start of this large-scale invasion against Ukraine, because they might be organizing sufferings for Ukrainians, but strategically Russia is losing in terms of is losing basically to some countries like China, who is the main country Russia is dependent on, and even the rapprochement which took place last year between US and Russia didn't bring Russia, despite specific political way internationally. So there was a rise, and there was a moment when Russia could use that leverage over Trump looking for a deal. However, Russia was demanding too much. A deal didn't happen and won't happen in the months to come. But Russia's dependence on China economically and political getting worse from Russian point of view and from Russian perspective within the last year. And I think that US is having no leverage to impact China's position, and China's rival over the international economic and political leadership in the world is just deteriorating the position of Russia in this triangle between US, China, and Russia.
Mm-hmm. And also, just I want to come back to a little bit of the defense angle here. We've had also recent strikes. I mean, we mentioned energy, that Ukraine can reach deep into Russian territory and strike at those refineries. There are always those kind of targets, but also reaching Moscow itself. So what do you think that kind of impact is going to have on, let's say, the Russian psyche of seeing more of those attacks reach Moscow?
The main impact we have observed before the Victories Day, which Russia celebrated on 9th of May, when Russia, for the first time since 2014, for the first time unilaterally, just one side demanded the ceasefire, just because they definitely knew that militarily, in terms of capabilities, Ukraine is absolutely capable of striking Moscow. And the simple mathematics of Ukraine's deep strikes deep into Russian heartland over refineries and military production facilities just prove this. Up until now, Ukraine has extended the range of deep strikes inside Russia and up to 1,750 kilometers in Republic of Komi, the latest and the longest range of deep strike, which was fixed recently. And this is a huge increase of this range of deep strikes, because the first one were just like 100, maximum 200 kilometers several years ago. And Moscow is halfway of this deep strike range. So it's like 600 something kilometers from Ukraine's border and from Kiev. So Russia knew that Ukraine can organize a blackout, can organize some strikes inside Moscow center, and Russia cannot cover with its air defense, which was pretty successful, the whole Moscow even right now, because they have to defend their refineries and facilities around the country.
Yeah, so the reach continues of what Ukraine is able to do. Fascinating stuff. Look, we'll have to close it there. Always a pleasure speaking with you. That was Mariya Zolkina there. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.